Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. Bonjour tout le monde. Nous allons commencer.
Hello, everybody. We're going to be starting. I just want to make sure that whoever...
I think we have a few principals in the audience here, and we'll just get started with our program today. Alors, bonjour, bienvenue à...
Welcome to Sisler High School. À l'occasion...
I would also like to welcome those who have tuned in via our live stream. Welcome, bienvenue. Thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. My name is Angela Cassie, and I'm the Director of Communications and External Relations for the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, and I will be your MC for today's meetings. I would like to begin by extending our sincere thanks to Sisler High School Principal George Heska and Vice Principal Ken Reimer for your hospitality and help with this event. Thank you. We've had a number of students helping us all morning already, whether it would be greeting at the door. We'll have some speakers and some performers that you'll see shortly. And a lot of the students also worked to prepare all of the white ribbons that are displayed outside, and a number of us are wearing today. And we'll speak a little bit more about that portion of our program in a little while. But before we begin our formal program, I'd just like to share a couple of housekeeping items. First, the washrooms, very important, are just outside this door and down the hall. Simultaneous interpretation is available. Alors, la traduction simultanée est disponible. At the back of the room, we have our translators, and there are headsets if you wish. Channel number 1 would be for English, réseau numéro 2.
And channel number 2 for French, if you need interpretation services. And everything is available at the back of the room.
Interpretation is also available. And Tanya has joined me on the other side of the stage, and we invite anyone that requires the service to please locate themselves close to the interpreter, and we have some museum staff who can help you if you need, just if you want to give us a sign. So I think that is it for some of those high-level housekeeping items. This meeting is, as I mentioned, being live streamed, and you will notice that there are video cameras and photographers located around the room, so we just wanted to make you aware of that. So to give you a quick run-through of our program today, we'll be starting with some words from the chair of our Board of Trustees, followed by our President and CEO, as well as Chief Financial Officer. We'll have a special presentation from some students at Sisler High. Following that, we'll have a panel discussion from some of our staff and team in the Museum Practice Division. And finally, we will conclude with a question and answer period. And at the end of the question and answer period, there will be media availability. So we hope to conclude at noon, and I'll do everything that I can to make sure that we keep everything on time today. So without any further ado, we'd like to begin. And I'd like to begin by inviting the new chair of our board, Mr. Eric Hughes, to speak. Eric has been part of our board since 2009, when he was first appointed as vice chair, and he has been the interim chairperson since December of 2011. Eric has been the chief financial officer of Coral Hill Energy Limited since 2009. Prior to this, he was chief financial officer of Wave Energy Limited. Please join me in welcoming. Veuillez me joindre à souhaiter le bienvenu.
Welcome. Let's welcome Mr. Eric Hughes.
Good morning. Bonjour. C'est un plaisir d'être ici.
It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
For the introduction, and thank you to the students at Sisler High School for welcoming us here today for our annual public meeting. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi d'être ici avec vous.
It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you today. I would like to express my sincere gratitude for your interest in the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. The museum, this is the first museum that's exclusively dedicated to human rights in Canada, to the future of human rights, and to celebrating those rights. Our objective is not only to create a dedicated national forum for raising awareness about human rights, but also to help develop a new leadership in this area, both in Canada and on the world stage.
As I was walking in, I noticed the moving display that acknowledges another special aspect of today, which is the anniversary of the Montreal Massacre. In my opinion, it was one of the most disturbing examples of gender discrimination, where young women were murdered solely because they were young, intelligent women. This was far more than just a tragic event. It was a tragic event not only for Montreal and for the women, it was also a tragic event for our entire country, as this individual attacked our society and our values. For me personally, at the time, in 1989, December 6th, I was 2 days away from getting my chartered accountant marks. I was engaged to the lady who is now my wife, who was a young Francophone engineer, and suddenly the getting of the marks seemed so utterly irrelevant as we saw how tragically this event unfolded. What happened to this woman became very, very real and very, very important. Personal connections make human rights real. Personal experience obviously make those connections. But education is another powerful way that those connections can occur. As you'll hear many times this morning, education is a central pillar of this incredible project called the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. So it's a natural fit that today we're holding our annual public meeting at a school. I want to tell you, the students here today, what I told my own kids when I was speaking at their high school in Calgary a few months ago. You are living in truly unprecedented moments. You are more connected, you are more tech savvy, you are more mobile, more globally aware than any other generation that has come before you. And growing up in Canada, this gives you an unprecedented opportunity not only to make a mark on this world, but to make it a better place. It truly does. We live in a world that will need your leadership. You know well there are people here in Winnipeg and around the globe that live each day facing real barriers simply because of who they are. And our job is to change that. The Canadian Museum for Human Rights is going to put new tools in your hands so that you can begin to remove these barriers. But it's up to you to use them, and I invite you to take up the challenge. Leave your mark. Show the world that as individuals, we, together as a nation, are capable of what we are capable of achieving. Today you'll hear what the museum has been doing to create a place where all people, can have a meaningful stake in tackling some of our most pressing human rights challenges. It's a remarkable time for a remarkable project. We have confirmed that our doors will open in 2014. We have completed all the major exterior construction and are now firmly focused on the inside. And where not long ago our attention was aimed at research, planning, and development, we are now at an exciting place where transitioning to exhibit fabrication and where planning turns into operations. Today, you'll hear more about a museum with a clear vision, a clear focus about opening in 2014, and a clear plan to get there. As the museum's Board of Trustees, we are responsible under the Canadian Museums Act for all aspects of its business. We are the stewards of the institution. We supervise management and ensure that all major issues affecting the museum's business and affairs are given proper consideration. This is a very big job, and I would like to thank my fellow board members for all their hard work and dedication to this project. In addition, our staff are some of the most incredibly talented, dedicated, creative individuals who are on the front lines of bringing a truly world-class programs and exhibits to life. On behalf of the Board of Trustees, I'd like to acknowledge all the staff at the museum and thank you for your insight, your energy, your passion for this project. You are working very hard right now. and I want you to know that we are all very well aware of your efforts, and we thank you for that. This is truly something we are all in together. I would also like to acknowledge the Friends of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, which is our leading a fundraising campaign that has been a national success story on its own. $6 million in new private donations just in the past year, and a remarkable $136 million raised to date, and we all know they're not done yet. And I'd like to acknowledge also the museum's many partners, from the governments at all three levels, who have long recognized the value of this investment. To the thousands of Canadians who have helped shape this project with their ideas, their feedback, and their insight. To each of you here today, for your interest in a project that is bigger than any one of us, but will empower all of us to make the kind of difference that truly matters. Thank you again to Sisler High School and to the Canadians from coast to coast who are joining us on the web for today's events. I'm so glad you are with us this morning, and we look forward to welcoming you as we open our doors in 2014. It is now my pleasure to turn the microphone over to the museum's president and CEO, Stuart Murray. Merci à tous.
Well, thank you, Eric. Bonjour, good morning. George, I wanted to say that I think there's 79 big reasons that we should be giving you a hug today. George, I'm talking to you. George, I'm talking about you, my friend. 79 reasons to give you a hug, hey? Little inside secret. I just want to thank our wonderful hosts at Sisler High, and hello and bonjour to all who are joining us today, both here in Winnipeg and online. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi d'être.
It is a great pleasure for me to be here today with you. I would also like to express my most sincere gratitude for your interest in the Canadian Museum for Human Rights.
Weekly blog, or you follow us on Twitter or Facebook, you're already familiar with some of the work our staff are doing as we work towards our inauguration in 2014. But public meetings like this are also very, very important. They're an opportunity to step back and reflect on the big picture. They give us a chance to speak directly to Canadians about the work that we've been doing over the past year and the steps that lay ahead. And let me tell you this. When I step away from my desk and think about where this museum is at today and what our team has accomplished over the past year, I am very, very proud, and here's why. The process of building a human rights museum and getting it right is complex. At every step, to do it right, it means ensuring that our decisions reflect what we have heard during our national public engagement sessions. It means ongoing dialogue with communities, human rights advocates, and academic advisors. It means ensuring that our decisions can stand up to the scrutiny and the expectations of external reviewers, and most importantly, to the high expectations that Canadians have set on us. In practical terms, this means building a human rights museum that will be a source of national pride. There's a passionate debate over how this museum will tell certain stories, and there is a debate over which stories we should tell. In fact, spirited discussions will accompany every significant aspect of this project. This is how it should be. Human rights are best defended through education and public awareness, which requires open dialogue and vigorous debate. There are many ways that our subject matter could be approached. Everyone has an opinion, some strongly so. Our challenge as the museum's leadership is to make the difficult decisions about inaugural program content, knowing there will never be unanimous agreement. If your museum was intended to memorialize or to commemorate, then it might be appropriate to focus only on tragedy. But if your museum is intended to educate, to inspire action, then you must also include examples of where action has led to progress on human rights. So you have to do two things. You have to find powerful ways to showcase the problems, to help people learn why action is essential. And you have to find powerful ways to showcase how action can yield results, to help people learn that they can make a difference. That is what we mean when we say that we're striving for a balanced approach. We're not talking about sugarcoating history or covering up abuses. We're talking about injecting hope. And we need to do that through a Canadian lens, using a Canadian perspective and ensuring that Canadian examples are included. This is, after all, a Canadian National Museum. So when we talk about positive stories, we are talking about things like Canada's world leadership on same-sex marriage legislation. We're talking about a commitment to truth and reconciliation and acknowledgements of the abuse of residential schools. We're talking about public apologies as a pathway to healing. We're talking about the rise of anti-bullying programming and an acceptance of language rights. But we will also tell stories of where Canada has fallen short. That will be essential as well. But it can't be the only thing. You cannot simply be, and we will not be, a hall of grievances. Which brings me back to education. That is the purpose of schools like Sisler High's, and it is also the purpose of our museum. Our galleries, exhibits, public programs will be designed to educate and inspire action for human rights. And we are making solid progress towards that goal. That is what gives me pride as I reflect on where we've come and where we're at today. You know, a year ago, we had a steel and concrete shell. Today, we have an architectural marvel, the exterior of our building fully formed right down to the final piece of glass. A year ago, we had some excellent blueprints for exhibits and galleries, blueprints based on a tremendous volume of consultation, collaboration, and continued refinement. But today, we're moving from planning to producing. Working with some of the most creative firms in Canada and the world, we've started the process of developing the exhibits you'll see when you first visit the museum in 2014. A year ago, we promised that a key focus of this museum would be rich public programming that would offer new opportunities to learn and talk about human rights. Today, with our doors not even open, we're already making good on that commitment. With public events like the Holodomor Lecture Series that we offered in several Canadian cities just last month. So 2 years before opening, and we're already making a down payment on our promise to open new doors to learn, to converse, to take action on critical issues around human rights. Our remarkable building at the Forks is the structure of our museum, but education is the heart and soul. We're building partnerships with schools and universities, teachers' organizations, ministers of education, human rights scholars all across Canada. These relationships set the stage for one of our most important accomplishments from the past number of months, which has been the development of our learning and programming department. Our learning and programming department staff are committed to seeing that this museum benefits every classroom in the country. Not just when students are visiting the museum, but every day. And this morning, we're announcing an initiative that will make that happen. I'm very pleased this morning to acknowledge the presence here today of Paul Taillefer, who's the president of the Canadian Teachers Federation, who flew in from Ottawa to join us this morning. And Paul, I think you're here, and if you are, would you please stand? Welcome. Canada's teachers are already at the forefront of human rights education in this country. They're already bringing age-appropriate learning around bullying, racism, gender, ability, sexual orientation, and other human rights issues into the classroom. But what happens if teachers here at Sisler have developed an effective classroom resource that expands our kids' understanding of human rights issues? Could there be a way that educators in Vancouver or Halifax or Montreal could also have access to these teaching tools? If teachers in other Canadian cities have put together innovative learning resources that are proving effective, could they be shared with teachers here at Sisler? It's my great pleasure to announce this morning that the Canadian Museum for Human Rights and the Canadian Teachers Federation have joined forces to make this happen. Together, we will work with educators across Canada to build a nationwide inventory of human rights teaching tools. The result will be an unprecedented national toolkit for Canadian teachers, a resource that will open doors to new ways of teaching about human rights issues, and we believe will mark a new era in the way that Canadian students will learn about human rights. This is not just a great idea. It's an initiative, and it's an initiative that we're already setting in motion, and it's another clear illustration of progress at the museum. This national toolkit is another important example of ideas being translated into action and collaboration that helps us meet our common objectives. And I'd like to just thank the efforts of those involved in the learning and development programming that have enabled this program to happen while we are still under construction. That's quite a feat. And to be able to partner with the Canadian Teachers Federation, Paul, I can tell you we are just so thrilled and delighted to be your partner in this most incredible initiative. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This transition from planning to operations underscores the core of our focus at the museum in recent months, and certainly the focus over the year ahead. Inside our building, you will see the shift to operations as we turn on the interior lighting. The Tower of Hope has already become a permanent fixture in the city skyline and a very popular subject for photographers. You'll see this shift to operations as we bring on key staff with our multi-year staffing plans. You'll see this shift to operations as we make more of the kind of programming announcements like the one that we just made today. And you'll see the shift as we roll out details of our updated inaugural gallery plans in the spring of 2013, and also provide a sneak peek or two at the tools and technologies we'll be using to bring our exhibits to life. And our opening date will be announced in the first half of 2013. Choosing that date is a product of discussion between the museum, our master exhibit designer, the firms who are fabricating our most ambitious and complex interactive exhibits, and our tourism partners, both domestically and abroad. We're working along with us to ensure that we can leverage the ideal timing to bring a new product to market. The work to secure the date of our inauguration is happening right now. We have, without question, some incredibly busy months ahead of us. During the panel discussion today, you'll hear from people who are helping develop our content and our programming. Our remarkable research and curation team is leading the way on content development. They are an incredibly talented group of academics with top-notch credentials in fields related to human rights. Our design and media and collections team is also managing production of over 80 different projects. An incredible workload, but they're doing it. Our learning and programming team is not only coordinating the education's toolkit that we announced today, but a broad portfolio of educational programs for students and the general public. We have an amazing team of talented staff. Many have worked at some of the best museums of Canada and the world, and in universities across Canada. They have worked in places like the Canadian Museum of Civilization, the Canadian National War Museum, the National Gallery of Canada, Pier 21 Museum in Halifax, the Alberta Art Gallery, Parliament Hill, Olympic Games, and yes, our own very proud Manitoba Museum. I've never felt more exhilarated about this project than I do today, nor have I ever felt more proud of the people here. People who have taken what was once nothing more than an idea and built it into what we see today. And we're not done yet. Whether you're joining us today at Sisler High School, from elsewhere in Canada or somewhere else in the world, I invite you to stay in touch with us. Read our blog, follow us on Twitter, like our Facebook site. We are ramping up. It's full steam ahead until our doors are open, and we will continue to have new stories and new achievements to share with you. Merci. Thank you, everyone, for sharing this day with us. Thank you for your interest, your insight, your commitment to human rights issues, and your embrace of this remarkable project, this noble Canadian experiment called the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Le Musée canadien pour les droits de la
The Canadian Museum for the Human Rights is your museum.
Museum. It belongs to you. And the progress we've made today is fully yours to celebrate. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
I would now like to ask Suzanne Robertson to come to the podium. Suzanne?
Good morning. As the Chief Financial Officer, I'm the lucky one that gets to talk about the numbers. But as Stuart has said, it has been a year of great progress. We are meeting our project milestones, and it's a very exciting time of transition as we shift from planning to operations. Inauguration is set for 2014, and the museum is on sound financial footing as we move to operational readiness. Tremendous progress has been made in the construction over the past year. After beginning construction 3.5 years ago, our iconic building now stands fully formed on the Winnipeg skyline. As announced at last year's meeting, the total cost of the project is $351 million. The base building is 100% tendered and is tracking for the exterior and major components of the building, such as Bueller Hall, the Garden of Contemplation, and the Hall of Hope, to be substantially complete by the end of this month. It's exciting to see the interior finishing being done, the painting, the ceiling and floor finishes, and the completion of the washrooms. It's all coming together for the building to be turned over from PCL to CMHR early in 2013. The soft landscaping, however, the planting of the trees and the seeding of the prairie grass, of course, won't be completed till the spring once the ground is thawed. With funding certainty in place and inauguration set for 2014, good progress is being made towards moving the exhibits forward. We needed funding certainty to do that. Exhibit fabrication and audiovisual integration have been tendered, and the exhibit fit-up of the gallery spaces will be tendered early in 2013. In regards to opening, we have a clear plan as we ramp up to inauguration. The museum's move towards operations readiness is guided by sound, rigorously reviewed operations strategies. We have controls in place, both to ensure we adhere to our project timelines and budget targets, but also continue to maximize the value that we derive from every dollar invested in the project. We want to give you a little bit of an overview of the operational priorities this year and last year. Last year, our approved appropriations for 2011-12 fiscal year were $21.7 million. As our priority, though, was the completion of the capital project, exhibit and program development costs were deferred, and other non-essential cost reductions were implemented. This resulted in $10 million of savings, which were carried forward and which we were allowed to use for the capital project this year. CMHR operated for the 11-12 fiscal year within the reduced appropriations of $11.7 million. This year, with inauguration confirmed for 2014, the museum's operations reflect a move to readiness for opening, and fiscal discipline will continue. Appropriate staffing is an important part of the museum's shifts to operational readiness. Our staffing reflects this shift to operations. For example, we are currently recruiting for a number of positions related to facilities management, security, learning and programming, as well as visitor services. Our ramp up to operations has also meant that certain projects funded in prior years were carried forward and done in the 11-12 fiscal year. This timing difference, where the funding was received in previous years and we incurred the expense in the 11-12 fiscal years, show in the books as the expenses for 11-12 being $66,000 higher than the current year's revenues. However, we will continue to spend within our allocation. The most important development in the past year, of course, was getting our funding certainty. In July, to facilitate cash flow that will enable a 2014 opening, the federal government agreed to advance $35 million designated for future operating expenditures to be used to complete the construction of the museum project. This advance will be repaid in full in future years after inauguration and after the museum's revenue-generating activities are fully implemented. In addition, the Friends of CMHR secured financing that was facilitated by a $35 million guarantee from the province of Manitoba. The City of Winnipeg also increased its commitment to the project by $3 million. And finally, support from private donors continues to be strong. As Stuart mentioned, Friends have raised $6 million in pledges from private donors in the past year. The continued support of all levels of government, from the financial institutions as well, we thank them, and from the private sector are critical to the success of this project, and we thank them all. New revenue streams, however, including retail strategies and membership sales, are part of the shifts to operations. Those programs are in development now. For more information on our full financial information is available on the website. Our audited financial statements are part of the annual report, and we also post interim quarterly financial statements. So if you have any questions, please check them or see us later. Thank you.
Merci, Eric.
Thank you, Eric, Stuart, and Suzanne.
And I'm really excited about, not that I wasn't excited about your speeches, but I'm really excited about the next portion of our program. And I think some of you are wondering why a school and why Sisler High? Did you know that Sisler is acclaimed as one of the top 10 best public schools in Canada and the best all-around high school by Maclean's magazine? Math, technology, yeah. Math, technology, the language arts, music, sports, home economics, environment, their community garden. If I went through the list of the accomplishments and successes of the school, I would use the rest of our time here, and as tempting as that may be, at the end of the day, it's really striving for excellent human rights programming. It's well-rounded, striving for excellent, and we have, as a museum, a lot of those common aims. So while the museum is your museum and we can't wait to welcome of those students into our doors, the museum is also accessible to you outside of the doors of the museum, whether you visit us online or whether you participate in some of our education and public programming. So I'm very excited now to introduce the next part of our program, and I would like to welcome Sisler High School students, Kezia Mendoza, Peter Krawchuk, Jade Erasmo to the stage. Could you please join us?
Good morning and welcome to Sisler High School. On behalf of Sisler, I, Keisha Mendoza, welcome all guests here today and those watching live around the world. Sisler is honored to host the Canadian Museum for Human Rights annual public meeting. In order to serve as a positive influence on our community, our school has many student groups that promote and support basic human rights. From human trafficking to oversee educational funding, to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender awareness, to supporting those devastated by war, Sisler strongly upholds the values of human rights and social justice.
On December 6th, 1989, a man murdered 14 women at the École Polytechnique in Montreal. He took the lives of 14 young women in an act of hatred and violence, now referred to as the Montreal Massacre. He killed them because they were women, and only because they were women. His name became a household word after the massacre, but somehow the names of the 14 young women were forgotten. We must change that. Ever since the massacre occurred, Sisler has held a memorial for those women in this room on this day. In fact, this is the 23rd year since the massacre that we have honored these women. This year, we are honored to host the Canadian Museum for Human Rights annual public meeting on December 6th, so this then takes the place of our traditional memorial service.
At a time in our history when 25% of men are physically violent towards women, it becomes increasingly important for men to support each other in the campaign to end violence towards women. In the hallway, you will notice a display with the names of the women, along with 14 lit candles to honor the memory of the 14 women whose lives were taken by a madman. As each candle burns brightly, we remember that the 14 lives were snuffed out in an ugly act of violence towards women. And we join together in the hope that all people everywhere will be safe. We would ask that all the men in this room join us and wear a white ribbon in support of this day. Please feel free to pick up a white ribbon as you're leaving, located on the table outside of the theater. Thank you.
With the completion of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights approaching, we, along with the City of Winnipeg and the Province of Manitoba, join together in the excitement. We hope this museum will become a national and international meeting ground to educate the importance of human rights and initiate positive momentum towards ending discrimination and oppression. With that being said, I would like to introduce Sisler's High School's very own dance troupe, Sisler's Most Wanted. Yes.
Heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. You don't really care for music, do ya? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Baby, I've been here before. I've seen your flag on the marble arch. Our love is not a victory march, it's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. 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 Maybe there's a God above, but all I've ever learned from love was how to shoot somebody who outdrew ya. It's not a cry that you hear at night. It's not someone who's seen the light. It's a cold and broken hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah.
Well, I think we understand why that group is called Sisler's Most Wanted. And I just want to acknowledge Melanie Echthaid, who helped choreograph and work with the students in the development of that beautiful piece. Thank you, Melanie. So we're going to move right into our panel discussion. And part of this, as they're setting up, I'm going to just begin to start introducing our panelists. Is everyone there? I think we're missing one chair. I get the short chair. I need the other handheld. That's kind of tough to follow that up, eh? Do you guys want to try dancing? Come on. Okay, well, I'd like to introduce our panel. I'm going to start with Gilles Hébert, who is our Vice President, Museum Practice. Monsieur Hébert joined the CMHR in January of 2012 and brings more than 25 years of experience as a curator, senior arts administrator, museum professional, and artist. Throughout his career, he's held senior positions with the Winnipeg Art Gallery, the St. Norbert Art Centre in Manitoba, the Mendel Art Gallery in Saskatoon, the Art Gallery of Windsor in Ontario, and most recently he served as the Executive Director of the Art Gallery of Alberta in Edmonton, where he successfully led that institution through the final stages of its renewal, punctuated by the opening of its new facility in the winter of 2010. Gilles was actually born in St. Boniface, Manitoba, and he received his Bachelor of Arts from the University of Manitoba, and he also studied fine art history and took studio courses at both the Ontario College of Art and Design and the University of Toronto. In 2002, he received the Queen's Jubilee Gold Medal, and in 2010, he received the University of Manitoba's Faculty of Arts Celebrated Alumni Award. Welcome, Gilles.
Thank you.
Next to Gilles is June Creelman. She's our Director of Learning and Programming. She joined the team this year and has over 25 years experience in developing programming in both the private and public sectors for museums, cultural and historic sites. June has played a leading role in the development of new national institutions such as the Canadian War Museum, Founders Hall, Pier 21, Canada's Immigration Museum. She also worked internationally on projects such as a children's museum in Argentina, public access to the parliament in Rwanda, and international expositions in Spain, Korea, and China. Welcome, June. Bienvenue. Next to June is Corey Timpson. He's our Director of Design, New Media, and Collection. He's been with the museum since 2009 and is responsible for directing design, new media, and collection-based initiatives. His primary focus at the museum is interactive and dialogic experiences, and I think dialogic is a word he made up. And it's really about the experiences between and amongst visitors, both online and on-site. Corey has a BA in law from Carleton University and a postgraduate diploma in interactive multimedia from Algonquin College of Applied Arts and Technology. And prior to accepting his role at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, Corey spent 8 years at the Canadian Heritage Information Network and Virtual Museum of Canada. Welcome, Corey. Natalie Fadar is our new media project coordinator. Welcome, Natalie. Natalie joined the museum in 2010 in the position of exhibit contract coordinator. She has a Master's of Interior Design from the University of Manitoba and a postgraduate diploma in Heritage Resources and a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Memorial University of Newfoundland. Her experience includes museum curatorial positions, various leadership roles in nonprofit, professional, and student groups, and experience with design contracts, fabrication, construction, and installations. Welcome. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Dr. Travis Tomchuk, who's one of the curators researchers at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. He's been with the museum since January of 2012. He completed his PhD in history at Queen's University, and prior to that, he received a master's, or obtained a Master's of Arts in History from the University of Manitoba. Throughout his academic and professional career, Travis has gained a strong background in both research and oral history methodologies. And in his role at the museum, Travis conducts research for exhibits that focus primarily on Canadian human rights journey, issues, and related subject matters. So welcome, panelists.
Welcoming ourselves.
Okay, the panel's over now, thanks. Okay, so we're just going to start with Gilles, and I'd like you to talk a little bit, we hear a lot about this term, Ideas Museum.
The Ideas Museum.
What is that?
Well, you know, it's actually kind of shorthand. It makes it easy for us to try and explain how we are approaching the development of what is absolutely the most ambitious cultural project in a generation in this country. When people think of museums, they generally think of objects and labels that describe the objects, and those objects are usually collected in rooms that we call galleries, and there's a thematic, and those are the accepted strategies that people expect when they hear the word museum. We will have objects and we will have artifacts, but we will also be using other strategies to tell stories. And again, when you talk about a museum, you don't often think about it in terms of taking action, dialogue, individual responsibility, and these kinds of concepts that we work with every day in terms of the development of our programming, both in terms of the exhibits, but also the public programs and the school programs that June and her people are working on. So it's a shorthand way of explaining what we're doing.
Okay, so from now on, we'll just say Ideas Museum.
Just ideas, yeah.
Okay. So, but what does that mean at the end of the day? What will someone experience when they come through the doors?
Well, we're using all kinds of strategies to tell stories and to engage our visitors. And part of it will be, of course, the digital technology piece and the public program piece. But again, it's less of a reliance on the artifact or the object, and more of a reliance on new strategies to tell a story. And I guess that's the easiest way for me to try and explain.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
And these guys will help me too, so
Okay.
that's good.
Well, okay, so Corey, help Jim. Can you talk a little bit about what you think technology and human rights,
Right.
what do you struggle with every day when you're trying to bridge those two things?
How much time do you have?
How much time?
I
2
think,
minutes.
I think when we think about technology in the museum and how we're employing it, it's actually, it couldn't be a better fit than given our museum subject matter. So I think leaning on what Gilles just spoke about, the idea museum, our subject matter is conceptual. It's a concept, it's an idea. And I love this quote that I've been using for about 12 years by this experienced designer, Nathan Shedroff, who says the most interactive experience you'll have in your life is a great conversation. So, you know, human rights, conceptual, a lot of different interpretations and perspectives on human rights. And when we think about the role of media and technology, we think about how can that be a facilitator of the conversation. A throwback to our mandate of encouraging reflection and dialogue. When we employ technology, be it a game, an app, a table, your mobile device, the website, we're employing it in such a way to try and facilitate that dialogue, to encourage that communication and to deliver stories. So that's, I mean, it's a chance of a lifetime to work on a project like this. It's why I moved to Winnipeg to work on this project. And you know, it's just got such a great fit between our subject matter and what technology can do.
Okay, but I mean, I can barely work my BlackBerry most days, and I refuse to even try the iPhone. So, you know,
First of
and
all,
there are a lot of people like me who, you know, you say technology, and right away I think I'm going to struggle my way through the entire museum, and I won't know how anything works. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, and first of all, congratulations for admitting that in public. But I mean, this is only the technology piece that I was talking about, and the way to build a proper program or great exhibits means they have to be multifaceted. It has to be like an onion with many, many layers. So we have to have passive experience where people read, watch, and listen. We have to have active experience where we ask people to do something. We have to have interactive experience where we build some kind of reciprocal relationship between the museum, the visitor, and visitors. Immersive environments we'll have in the museum that are multisensory. So, you know, no one should be hung up on, wow, this is going to be a high-tech museum, I'm not going to be able to operate. There will be absolutely something for everybody, irrespective of ability, and I think Natalie will talk a little bit about that. But, you know, this is why we're working with arguably the world's largest exhibition design firm. They're pros, and we have great staff to help them out as well. And it's not just about the technology, but the technology will be one of those layers of the onion that provides a full, well-rounded experience for all of our visitors.
The mechanism of delivery, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. And maybe you want to just build on that a little bit, Natalie, because Corey mentioned accessibility and the museum. Could you touch a little bit on your work there?
Sure. Sorry, I'm not quite sure how far away I need to hold. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So the museum has created the Inclusive Design Advisory Council. I've seen a few of the members out here today, actually. And the reason that we created this group, it's comprised of 8 people from across Canada with varying levels of ability and expertise related to inclusive design. And we've created this committee so they can advise us on what we can do in our exhibition and program and to create the best experience for all of our visitors, regardless of their level of ability. Right now, we're closely looking actually at all of our areas of our exhibits with them and looking at where we can implement ASL, LSQ, closed captioning, open captioning, just what would be most appropriate to use in what instance. The museum is actually in a really excellent position because we're building everything from the ground up. You know, we're starting from scratch, and a lot of institutions don't have that wonderful opportunity that we have.
So when you're talking about accessibility, though, is it really just about how you get to use the exhibits?
No, it's the museum. We're really committed to, for all of our visitors to be able to have a rich, fruitful experience, an educational, just a really rich experience. So we're just looking at ways that we can basically do that for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So Travis, as a researcher, you're involved in the development of the content of the inaugural exhibits. What's the most interesting part of your job?
I would say for me, the most interesting part is doing the actual research. Quite a history nerd, so I enjoy reading books, reading articles on various human rights subjects as they pertain to Canada, because that's my specialty. And the other thing too is having a background in Canadian history, I have a pretty good sense of a lot of the human rights issues that we're featuring in the gallery I work on. But at the same time, for the ones I don't know very well, I get a chance to actually go a bit deeper into that material, and I learn fascinating things. For instance, sleeping car porters, a job that if you were a black man in the early 1900s, right up until 1960, that was generally, because of the discrimination you would have faced as a black man, that was probably the best career option open to you. However, we're talking about gentlemen who have university degrees in a lot of cases doing that kind of work. But the discrimination they face in the workplace if they work sleeping car run from Toronto to Winnipeg, that was 72 hours of nonstop work. They were constantly on call. They didn't have much in the way of breaks. They were not provided with sleeping quarters aboard the train. They had to pay for their own meals while working out of their own pockets, as was the same case with their uniforms. And also, when they did eat meals in the dining car, they were only allowed to eat at particular times when there wasn't going to be a lot of the white passengers present. However, if some white passengers wanted their breakfast rather early in the morning and they came onto the dining car while black sleeping car porters were present, a curtain was drawn around the black sleeping car porters so white passengers would not have to see them. The way black sleeping car porters addressed this issue was to form their own labor union to fight for changes in their workplace, to fight the discrimination they faced. But they had to develop their own union because at the time white unions were not open to having black members.
So that's an interesting story that has links here in Winnipeg as well. So very often, though, when we look at it on the surface, what you're saying is you can look at it as discrimination, but what you're starting to peel back using Corey's onion reference is making those connections and those human rights links to the surface.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. So June, what are you going to do, or what do you do every day?
What are you up to? I'm the Director of Learning and Programming, so I'm the one who gets the really great job of, me and my team, of course, building a really rich program activities. And today we're here in your school. I'm looking at you students from Sizzler, but we sure hope when we open you're going to be in our museum. And there's a place in the museum that's reserved for students. Like we have classrooms. Not that it's going to be a normal classroom. Like you're going to be able to do fun things there. And we're going to be having a whole suite of activities in the classroom and in the galleries and different themed experiences. And it's going to not just be for high school kids. We're going to have something for everybody, like starting maybe even in kindergarten, grade 1, and all the way up and into university. So we're developing a whole range of programs for school groups, those who can come, and of course, we'll bring things out to those who can't.
And who are you working with as external partners? We heard a little bit about our exciting announcement today with the Canadian Teachers Federation, but are there other partners working along with you?
Oh yeah, we're working with, of course, Manitoba, Manitoba teachers, departments of education all across Canada. But we have other partners too. One of our landmark programs that we want to develop is a national student program where we bring high school or university students to Winnipeg maybe for up to a week, and they're going to have rich programming in the museum, but around Winnipeg themes. I mean, our Indigenous history, the Winnipeg General Strike, women's rights. And so we're working with partners like the Asper Foundation and Rotary International and Encounters with Canada to try to make that possible.
Thank you. And what if, for some of us who may have finished high school a few years ago, Okay, a lot of years ago. What is there for me at the museum if I want to come on an evening or a weekend by myself or with friends or family?
Yeah, we've got public programs too. So if you just come in on your own any day, there's going to be people in the galleries who are going to be able to talk to you. So if you're not the technology type, we're going to have people who can talk to you and explain things. And these people will be really highly trained and knowledgeable, but they'll have things too that you can look at and see. For example, if you're talking about child labor, we may have a little rug and you can look at how many knots per inch and even try to make some knots and think about that sort of thing. And we'll be having film nights and lectures and panel debates for adults and things for kids. It can be as simple as story time. And of course, there'll be the music and the art and the dance and that sort of thing, because I think we all saw today how art can be the most powerful way to convey messages.
Yeah, thank you, June. So we're just about finished our time with the panel, but I thought, Travis, I'd just bring it back to you a little bit. And we've heard a lot about oral histories, and what is an oral history and why are they important, and what does that mean to your job as a researcher in the museum?
Right, so an oral history is a type of interview. It differs from the kind of typical journalistic interview that you will see, whereas you're kind of, in those situations, they're quite short. You're maybe just speaking about a particular issue. However, with the oral histories that we do, and we capture those on video, we film them with video cameras, and we have the staff that conduct those. And for us, on the research end of things, when we've decided on a particular subject, we need to contact people that were involved, whether it was a survivor of a mass atrocity or someone who, fought against, people who fought against various forms of discrimination. Coming up with a list of questions we want to speak to them about, having them, accept, being willing to participate in such a process, and letting them tell their own personal stories at their own pace, which means that in some cases an interview can last under an hour, and we've done at least one that lasted up to 7 hours. So it's important for us because oral histories, it's a project that's still ongoing, of course, but they inform the work that we do. They're going to be a component of a number of the built exhibits throughout the museum. And the other thing too is because in a lot of cases the people that we're interviewing have not actually been interviewed before about their own personal experiences, that that becomes part of our oral history collection at the museum. That will also act as a research tool, not only for us, but for researchers who are interested in particular subject matter.
Yeah. And do you have a sense of how many oral histories have been conducted so far?
As of yesterday, I understand we've done about 130.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for all of you for joining us in the panel, and I think we're going to move to the Q&A. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to our question and answer period. Nous allons commencer avec notre période de questions.
We are going to start with our question period.
A lot of our students from Sisler need to get back to their regular schedule of activities. So we actually had offered an opportunity for a few of the students to ask questions. And what I'll do is provide an opportunity. And I just want to warn you, there may be a bell that rings in about 10 minutes. That means the students need to go. Everyone else, you can stay put. You're not free yet. But why don't we open the floor to the back of the room, and if you want to direct the questions to me, and we have our team of in front here, and they'll, depending on the nature of the question, help us to respond. So Lise?
Hello, my name is James Wilson, and I'm a grade 12 student here at Sisler High School. And my first question is, given that the current Ukrainian government has officially reversed their position of the Holodomor genocide, that it did not happen, what is your position? Like, how do you guys see this?
Okay, so I think that's a Clint question. Dr. Clint Curl, who's head of stakeholder relations as well as being a researcher and curator with the museum.
Sure. Good morning. That's a good question. First of all, I think we need to talk a little bit about what is Ukraine's official position. In 2006, Ukraine passed a law which recognized the famine in 1932-33 as a genocide. I'll read you just two articles from that, from that piece of law. The first article states, the Holodomor of 1932-33 in Ukraine is genocide against the Ukrainian people. And Article 2 says, public denial of the Holodomor of 32-33 in Ukraine is considered the desecration of the memory of millions of Holodomor victims, the humiliation of the dignity of the Ukrainian people, and is illegal. So this is in 2006. In 2010, then President Yanukovych made a public statement that the famine should not be considered genocide. And I think this is what your question is referring to, because it was a common tragedy of the Soviet people. So you have a situation in Ukraine today where you have a law on the books which has never been repealed, which identifies the famine as genocide. Then you have a statement by the head of state which says that it was not genocide. So what is the official position in Ukraine today? And the answer is confusion about this point. Now, to the extent that Ukraine today, the Ukrainian government is committed to the rule of law, to that extent, the law is the official position. So I think we're in a situation of confusion right now regarding Ukrainian thoughts about the status of the Holodomor as genocide. Nevertheless, your question is about the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. And here I'm very pleased to reassure you that our museum aligns with the Parliament of Canada, which in 2008 recognized the famine in Ukraine in 1932-33 as a genocide. And in fact, I think it's a very important story for our museum, and we have a number of exhibits which will deal in great detail with the Holodomor. Thank you.
Are you the keeper of all the questions?
I have a second one.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Given that gender identity issues are becoming a topical issue in human rights and social justice, what exhibits and education is planned for these topics?
Okay, so gender.
Gender identity.
Okay. Sharon Riley is our Acting Director of Research and Curation.
Gender issues right across the board were identified in every way when we did our cross-country evaluation of what people hope to see in the museum. They came up in our research with experts in the field and with activists in the field, in our own curatorial research. So every aspect of gender, human rights, from violence against women and equity issues to questions of lesbian and gay rights, bisexual rights, and transgender rights. So it's very important to us to address all of these issues. And our plan is to look at gender issues across all of our galleries. In fact, we have 10 different galleries. And I think that gender issues comes up in every single one, and in many cases more than one time. Specifically with regards to gender identity, we have two elements in our Canadian galleries, one of which is going to look at legislation protecting gender identity, and another which is going to incorporate oral histories and research with activists and members of the community to look at the experiences of transgendered and gay and lesbian and bisexual people. We're going to be looking from as Stuart was saying earlier, from positive stories about this, like in the Indigenous community, the respect and regard with which two identity persons are going to be interpreted, right through to the experiences of homosexuals under Nazi Germany. We're going to be looking at legislation and when legislation was passed to protect people, individuals, and we're going to be looking at activities that people engage in to bring greater awareness and to make change. We're going to be looking at bullying. We have one exhibit toward the upper levels of our gallery, which is going to be a full map of the world and which is going to look at cross-cutting issues and look at those in many different countries in all parts of the world. And one of the first issues we identified to be looked at there was that of gender, with all of those manifestations. And further to the things that Corey was saying about the way our exhibits are going to be digital, this is going to be a digitally fed exhibit that can be changed and upgraded and made current practically on a daily basis, if not a daily basis. So this is some place where we're going to be able to look at the struggles going on internationally in this regard and many other issues and keep focused on that.
Thank you, Sharon. And I know the bell is going to ring, so if it rings, just pause with your question. We'll let it ring, and then we'll let you continue with your question. So please go ahead.
My name is Bradley Rogowski. I'm 11th grader at Sisler High School. What are the economic consequences of genocide, and how does it affect culture?
Good question. Clint?
What's with you guys? I don't know. Okay, Bradley, I got a good answer. Okay, under current international law, let me read you the definition of genocide. It's good important that we know what we're talking about. Okay, genocide is defined in the Genocide Convention, also in the Rome Statute, as the intentional attempt to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. Right? So you have the intent to destroy the group. It's a group attack. In the law, international law, there's 5 ways, right? 5 sort of actions that are specifically mentioned. Outright killing of members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, imposing measures intended to prevent births from within the group, or finally, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So this is genocide. It's the attempt to destroy the group in whole or in part. Now,
Just for the record, we weren't censoring any inappropriate language. That was the bell.
I missed my chance there to say something. The consequences of genocide are far-reaching. They affect almost every element of the victim group's life and the aftermath. Raphael Lemkin, who's the jurist who developed the concept of genocide in the 20th century, argued that one of the standard techniques of genocide is to attack the economic basis of the target group. So, for example, seizing businesses or properties, or excluding members of that group from certain professions. Right? These are sort of examples of ways to weaken the economic base as an attempt to destroy the group. So the effects of these kind of attacks can be very long-lasting and have major economic consequences for members of the group. And often these will actually be generational consequences economically, where the group, even after the genocide is over, there's a survivor remnant, they're put in such a bad position economically that it can take generations to recover what's lost. And in some cases, particularly with the seizure of businesses and properties, these are never recovered. You also asked about culture. Lemkin also identified cultural attacks as pretty standard technique of genocidal perpetration. So, for example, the destruction of religious buildings or sacred sites, desecration. Or, for example, the marginalization of language. Or even, we could say, for example, the targeting of poets, writers, and other cultural leaders. And these are quite common in genocides. Those cultural attacks occur as the group is being attacked. And of course, as well, you have major long-term ramifications from those kind of cultural attacks. And you know, one of the things about genocide is when you have that cultural loss, not only the victim group is hurt, but the whole world is hurt. It's sort of like a situation of biodiversity where you're getting certain life forms that are eradicated. It affects the whole ecosystem. And it's the same way with the cultural life of the world. When one culture is marginalized, destroyed, dismantled, all of us are impoverished by that. These destructive effects of genocide become current human rights issues, which is one of the reasons why our museum is tackling the subject of genocide, because while it's history, it's also current events. And human rights can be an effective tool for groups to begin to reconstruct their lives, their economic and cultural lives in the aftermath. And so this is one of the reasons why we've got lots of exhibits looking at this subject. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Clint.
Hi, my name is Ren Sousa. I am grade 12 in Sisler. And my question is, given that the Manitoba government recently recognized transgender rights in our charter, what plans do you have to address the issues of the LGBT community, especially in regards to gender-neutral or unisex bathrooms, facilities in public access buildings?
Okay. Suzanne, responsible for the building as CFO, could you answer that?
Hi, sure, thank you, good question. There are many public washrooms in the museum, and we have made provision for unisex or gender-neutral washrooms within the facility, so we are providing that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think that's all for the questions from the school. Thank you very much. Have a good lunch and get back to class. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
So we'll move right into the rest of our Q&A session, and I just want to, if I can just have the CMHR staff with the microphones signal where you are. There's Hélène in the corner over there, Lee's over here, and so if you just want to give them sign, we'll go about your questions. What we'll ask is that you ask one question at a time. If after this question and answer period we're unable to answer your questions, we will be available afterwards. We will be also taking some questions that have been coming in online through Twitter, and we will be posting a frequently asked question document on our website in the coming days, so please check back there. And I just remind the media that there'll be media availabilities following the question. And so we're just going to set some basic ground rules, namely that everyone's question and perspective is important, but we will not accept or respond to comments that are personal insults or personal attacks or insults. And we will allow each individual, as I said, to answer one at a time. Of course, if there aren't any additional questions, we would come back to you at that point. So I think Lee's in the corner. You have a question?
Hello. My name is Ostap Hawaleshka. I'm the former honorary consul for Ukraine in Manitoba. And I want to tell you, I liked Angela Cassie from way back when, and I like her even more. Because if she can't operate the BlackBerry, let me tell you something, she's my type of lady. Because I need assistance with getting this DVD operating in my own house. So my grandson does it for me. Anyway, I'd like to, we talk a lot of things here, and I think there's been really a lot of good steps forward taken by the museum over the past number of years. I don't think it's a big secret that as a member of the Ukrainian-Canadian community and one of the original rah-rah supporters of the museum, as Mrs. Asper can probably agree to that I turned out to be a cynic over the years and really quite disappointed with the way things were going and the prism that was being used to show things in the museum. I would like to say that the most recent statements from the museum are a big step forward in addressing these kind of problems. Particularly, I like some of the comments of Mr. Murray, where he mentioned that we're looking at it through a Canadian prism, Canadian viewpoint, which I think is what it should be. It's a Canadian museum. So that's excellent. Furthermore, some comments that it should not be simply an exposition of tragedies, but should be something that leads you to the understanding of what has to be done in order that those tragedies do not occur again. So I think this is really very good. So congratulations to the team, and particularly to Mr. Murray, Clint Curl, Angela Cassie, and I don't know who else was involved in initiating the contact with the Ukrainian Holodomor Museum Memorial in Kyiv in Ukraine, and to bring 2 experts to Canada in this recent tour. I think this was a big step forward. With the question that I have, and I wrote this to Mr. Murray on the 10th of November, and I noticed on the panel there was this one person, unfortunately can't remember the name. You know, I'm at least over 35. I don't remember these things. But I am concerned about the museum's ability to attract a visitor on a repeat visit. Not the first visit. I think everybody will come to a first visit just to see. But in order for the museum to be successful in bringing in people as a learning experience where you would like to learn again, and I have serious concerns about the so-called iPad approach. I call it iPad approach. In my letter, I wrote that this looks to me like a CNN United States election presentation. You know, where you pull the thing down, you move things back, you have red squares, green squares, yellow squares, and so on. I tell you what, that doesn't turn me on at all. Maybe the students that just left, maybe it's for them. So I really would like to have that aspect to be looked at.
Okay. Maybe I'll ask Stuart to start, and maybe Corey or Gilles if you'd like to add.
Stop. Thank you so much, and thank you for not embarrassing me, because we talked privately about answering your letter. You know I'll answer it, and I thought you might bring it forward today, but thank you so much, and thanks for your comments. You know, the fact of life is, I think that a question was asked about this being an idea museum. I think it speaks really to your point specifically, and it's not just about the utilization of the individual using technology. It's about the museum using internal technology to be able to deal with the iterative, ongoing issues that happen today around human rights. So we're very aware that this is not a museum that is going to use technology to alienate, because I appreciate your comment, and there's a lot of visitors that will feel that way. So we want to make sure that it's a very welcoming experience. But we will be using, not so much as an individual having to figure out the technology will come to you, but we'll use that to make this a very iterative, creative, ever-changing opportunity, because, again, our mandate is to ensure that we look at issues that are happening in Canada and worldwide to bring those to our visitors. So you'll never, ever have the same visitor experience once. I don't know, Corey, if you want to add anything on that? You know, I always has to upstand me, this guy.
I'd just like to reiterate also that a good friend of mine is the VP of Technology at the Museum in Washington. And it's a very, very technology-heavy museum when you compare it to other museums. But he gave me a quote once, and he said, "The best experiences in our museum are the people on the floor." And so as someone who's largely responsible with my colleague Chris Rivers, the Director of IT, for ensuring technology in the museum, it's by no means your experience does not rely on that. It's what can the technology do to facilitate, should you choose to use it. But it's really about building a multi-sensory, multifaceted experience. And we're in a situation where we can take advantage of the maturity of the technology domain to use it really wisely and smartly and cost effectively, but is by no means a crutch that your museum experience will have to lean on.
And I mean, I think June as well touched a little bit about learning and programming earlier, and the use of theater and arts and music as powerful ways, and those are some of the elements that would encourage you and provide you opportunities to come back to the museum as well. Do we have another question over here?
Good morning, my name is Jess Turner. I'm co-chair of the Manitoba League of Persons with Disabilities. My question is twofold. Canada, and more so the province of Manitoba, has a long-standing and rich history related to the disability rights movement. How will this history be showcased at the museum? And I think we can all agree that disability affects everyone. And so how will this subject matter be intertwined with other aspects of human rights?
Okay. I'm going to ask Sharon Riley, Acting Director of Curation and Research, to address that question.
Well, as Natalie said from the stage, we do have our Inclusive Design Advisory Council, which began really as a group of people who would help us to think about making the facility accessible for persons of all kinds of abilities and levels of abilities. But that committee has actually started to become something else, because we've been talking to them about the exhibits that we have planned and the research that we're doing, and they are in fact advising us at this stage on talking about disability rights in our exhibits. We're also working with other groups across the country in planning these kinds of exhibits. So we have, I gave a presentation to our IDAC committee back in March, and for that I was asked to point to all of the different places we have planned so far where we're actually going to be addressing disability rights, and the number was really very good. There were a good number of exhibits that are planned, including one of our story niches, which is in the Canadian Gallery, which is a small exhibit area. We have 18 of these surrounding the perimeter of that gallery. They're 8 foot by 8 foot by 8 foot square. And for that space, we've been working with the Ryerson Institute of Disability Rights in Toronto and preparing an exhibit on that area. We've also been involving our oral history research in this capacity. So it's a very important issue to us. It's one where we want to keep growing and learning and changing our exhibits up to, again, tackle emerging issues and issues that we can't cover off on day one, because we can't cover every single issue that we want to from the whole range of human rights concerns. So it's very important to us, and we definitely are working toward that.
Thank you, Sharon. I'm going to ask Lise Pincus to ask a question that's either coming through social media, Twitter, or Facebook.
Yeah, so this message is from Pamela on Facebook. She would like to know why the atrocities of our country are being left out. Do we not need to acknowledge our weaknesses in order to not repeat them?
Canadian, or Sharon, would you like to, or Stuart?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. First and foremost, one of the areas that we want to be very clear about is the fact that being a Canadian Museum for Human Rights, that we respect governments of Canada who over time have recognized 5 genocides. So that is one area that we want to ensure that we feature in our temporary, or the gallery that we currently are calling Breaking the Silence. In addition to that, we will also be featuring other genocides, such as the Cambodia issue, and some lesser-known genocides. Our simple fact is that we know that there's a tremendous number, and people use the number 80. One of our challenges is to get to inauguration, we had to settle on how many we could do for inauguration. That doesn't mean that after inauguration we won't add and deepen and enrich other genocides that are important to visitors, to Canadians, that we've listened to. So our initial approach was to ensure that we had something that was recognized Canada, at Canada's recognition of genocides, as well as some other genocides. And I may just ask Clint.
Before you do that, Stuart, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt. I think the question was more specific to Canadian experiences. Rather, I think maybe the word atrocities maybe made a connection more to external issues, but I think it's really speaking about Canada's own history. So I'm just wondering if Sharon or a member of the curatorial team or Gilles could speak more specifically to Canada.
Okay,
sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. One of the questions that we've been dealing with in the last week is the question of, are we telling Canadian stories that are positive? And I would argue that we're doing that very much so because we are telling the story of our history in this country, and that includes the violations of human rights and people's struggles to bring about change, to improve life for the group or the cultural organization or whosever rights have been violated. So if we're looking at an issue, for example, like the internment of Japanese Canadians during the Second World War, which is one of the black spots on Canada's history. We're examining that history, we're facing up to it, and we must. But we're also talking about the fact that Japanese Canadians themselves, first generation, second generation, into the third generation, organized and fought to have the wrong that was done to that group of Canadians apologized for some token of redress to occur, and for the opportunity to evolve for Japanese Canadians to become a fully integrated part of Canadian society, which of course has happened today, and not that many years ago that this event that began in 1942 with the bombing of Pearl Harbor occurred. So I would argue that that's a Canadian success story. It's an atrocity. It was a terrible thing that happened, but we've been able to come back from that. And in that way, I think Canada does exemplify a country where people can fight to build and protect and enhance human rights. And we can look at dozens and dozens of stories throughout Canadian history where the very same kind of thing happens. So we can, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that's the biggie, I think, in Canada today. The forced relocation of Indigenous children into residential schools beginning in the late 1800s and continuing up until really quite recently in the 20th century has been a huge blight on Canada's growth and development and on the Aboriginal peoples of this country, and that's an issue that we're tackling in this museum.
Thank you,
So
Sharon.
yeah, we have to do this.
We're going to take one other question from social media.
This one from Twitter. Are Canada's first national internment operations going to be covered by an exhibit in the CMHR?
First national internment operations. Travis? Our resident historian.
Yeah. The answer is yes.
Yes.
I don't know what else to tell you. Yes, it will be there.
Well, that's in 140 characters, so it was a Twitter response. Thank you. So we're just over noon. Est-ce qu'il y a d'autres questions? Any more questions?
Is there any more questions?
Okay, I think we have one more.
Please provide an explanation for the desertion of so many former employees and their claims of government interference in decisions of museum content.
Story.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the question. Hopefully I'll understand this one. You know, the fact of life is there's a couple of issues there. Number one is the startup museum or startup project is always a challenge, and there's never one particular reason, I believe, where people move on. I think people make their own choices. I think the fact of life is that we have had in this startup project, what I call this noble Canadian experiment, we've had some challenges. A lot of it was on the basis that we did not have funding certainty. Funding certainty that came to us in July of 2012 was a real pivot point for us. It allowed us to ensure that we had a master schedule for an opening in 14, and it allowed us to actually even talk about an actual opening in 14. Prior to that, understand that some people with uncertainty weren't sure when we were going to open, and we had to be candid with people. So challenges along the way, absolutely. But I think I have to be clear to answer the person that asked that question. As I said from the podium, I am very confident in the women and men that are involved in this organization that we will open this museum in 2014. As I said, that we will talk about the actual date on early 2013. But I know that we are committed and we will get to creating something that all Canadians expect us to deliver, which is something that all Canadians will be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. So I believe that brings us to a close. J'aimerais premièrement commencer à remercier quelques
First, I would like to thank some persons.
To Vice Principal Ken Reimer and Principal George Heska and the staff and the students of Sisler High School. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. I would like to thank all of our speakers today, as well as the translators in the back of the room, our ASL interpreter, Tanya. Thank you very much. All of our technical team who are here late in the hour working out kinks and who've been here since early this morning allowing us to live stream. Thank you to everyone at the back of the room. Scott and Caroline here at the side of the room who've been following everything on social media and have been live tweeting and following us on social media. Shresh, Jessica, Aaron, Scott, and Jatinder, who have been helping us with everything IT related. Et parce que j'ai le microphone.
And because I have the mic, I also want to take a minute to thank my team.
Lindsay, Maureen, and Amy. It's been a challenging year. It's an exciting project, and it's a pleasure and an honor to work with each of you. So thank you for everything that all of you have done to make today and the last weeks and the last months fantastic time at work. Thank you, guys. Merci. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you very much. You're all great.
Our board, to the rest of the CMHR team, to our friends, both from the Friends of the Canadian Museum for Human Rights and everyone who joined us, merci pour avoir pris le temps.
Thank you very much for taking the time.
To the Cuisiniers here at the front of the room, thank you very much. Drive safely. Have a great day.